He works great.
I didn't know you had three. I thought you had two.
We have the new Bronco, and it says air conditioning comes
How old is
standard,
she?
and the
Let's
next
see. How old are they
picture
now?
down, picture of O.J. Simpson, like, like, oh my God, yes. You see that one?
Keep
Okay.
keep the leash pretty tight there.
Put your $100 in, place your order for your new Bronco you won't get for 3 years.
No.
Why, are they that far behind?
That's all.
We'll call this committee of the whole meeting to order on July 14th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, first up for public participation, Ms. Wanda Lee Rolfs.
Thank you. Good evening. It seems like it's been forever. And I think it has been a long 6-7 months. I would like to address the council tonight on item number 16 on the agenda, which relates to the Economic Development Program. Truly, I would like to do this after you guys have done the item 16 on the agenda, so I could hear what you have to say. But since the structure is not that way, I may be asking questions that you will answer after I've left, and I'll pick that up on my computer. But I do want to ask a few questions, and then if I must, I'll return next week to elaborate. Okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sure can.
Now, if I say something that seems like I'm making an assumption, I don't mean to be, so let me know if I am, rather than asking a straight question. Okay, this agenda item, number 16, is it about providing grants to building owners?
Yes.
2, this agenda item will look at and determine an amount of money that will be taken out of the general fund, correct?
I believe that's where the treasurer said it would come from.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. That is correct.
That is correct. Okay. And from what I understood from last week's meeting, and again, I can't hear very well from home, so sometimes when I say something, I may have missed something, but in the amount of $60,000 per year, that's what we would take out of the general fund?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what's being proposed.
Okay. The next question is this a one-year project that we'll be doing this when you approve the ordinance, or is this going to be a multiple-year project?
Beth, if you want to speak to that, you can.
Can you hear me? Yeah, it should be a multiple-year project, but everyone's got to prove that they've done the work they said they were going to do. Will be a tight screening. All of this will be very, very watched very closely. But yes, it will be a multiple, I imagine. I don't think all of these individuals will be able to do all of this work to that. We're just trying to get focusing on the downtown first, but it will be all of the businesses, anyone that wants to participate that has a distressed building.
Will that be decided every year, or will you have that, like we're going to be doing this program for the next 5 years, or just forever?
And I'll let the treasurer speak in a minute. There's no planned duration at this time. It will be like anything else, and we'll have a discussion annually during budget discussions as to whether we continue the program or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Treasurer, did you want to speak?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think you answered or pretty well covered the same thing I was. All of this would have to be budgeted annually or added to the appropriation annually. So it's conceivable it could be less money or it could be eliminated, but it's like anything else, like the animal control contract, or I don't even want to get into that, but probably a poor example, but other contracts or other things that are included in the budget, they have to be approved annually.
So the amount, even the 60,000, could be changed annually?
It could be. The ordinance, I believe, that's proposed calls for 60,000 a year as a maximum, if I understand it correctly. But that would have to require an amendment of the ordinance to, especially if you wanted to increase it.
So if we had absolutely no money, that would impact that maybe?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, this program is also something that will deal with the structural aspect of the building,
Correct.
correct? Are most of the buildings seeking the grants? I don't even know if you would know this yet because I don't know if you've sent out any applications, but I know there's been discussion with people about what they would like to see. Are most of the buildings seeking the grants currently being utilized or rented for someone else that is carrying on a business? In other words, if I owned a building down and there's nothing in there now, then I could get a business, or I could own one that does have a business.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
That's correct.
So it could be empty building that is looking to rent eventually.
Yes.
Is there a deadline on when a building project must be completed?
Yes.
And is that when they receive the money? After
So the
they-
way that at least we've had discussions up until now, and obviously that could change based on discussion tonight, is that an individual would come forward and prior to starting the project, they would request a grant, and then they would go through the process. There's an application process. There will be a committee, if it passes, that will review those, and then they can do the work that they have said they would. Upon completion of the work, they would have an inspection done and provide receipts for their work, and they could receive up to the $7,500. And we asked, one of the discussions we had this past week about that was that they would apply within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year, and that would be the deadline for disbursement of their request, of their grant. Because some projects may take longer, and we want to make sure that we give them plenty of time to complete the work. We don't want them coming forward in September or October requesting a grant and them not getting done by the end of the fiscal year and then missing out on the opportunity for the grant. So that's the idea anyways.
Well, I know at one time there was such a thing called T-grants. I don't know if any of you remember those, but it was right before I became executive director of Main Street. And those grants were basically given the money before they did it, and some of those people just left town with the money. And I think that's wrong.
I think we agree with you. Yes.
And as I look at the TIF project, needless to say, I've looked at it pretty doggone carefully and closely over the years. This project sounds a lot like that, because you're basically giving money or providing money to the building owner. The TIF never gave it to the business owner, they gave it to the building owners. And so when you get to looking at that, it kind of raises some hair on some people's back, that it looks a lot like that. So there's a lot of concerns out there.
So Wanda, I will say that we did have that discussion and we were very conscious of that. And that's why there was a certain facade program that we are intentionally not having discussions about, because we don't want people to confuse what we're trying to do in stimulating people buying buildings and helping restore downtown with that program and the stigma that comes with it. And also, this is not just for, the intention anyways, is not that this would be just for downtown.
Right.
This would be for any building in the city of Lincoln.
As many of you know, that I have several aspects of this that really kind of touch home. One, as Main Street Lincoln director, we had a wonderful downtown during that period of time. We didn't have the virus, so that alleviated, we just had some really good things going on with the Balloon Fest and all kinds of events. So when I look at the downtown, needless to say, I'm very in favor of that becoming, a really neat spot again. But the second thing is, I am also a taxpayer. And as a taxpayer, I don't want my taxes to go up. So I don't like to see any funds increase unless we're sure we've got the money coming in, so that next year at this time, they say, well, we're sorry, we have to increase your property taxes to help pay for some of these expenses. And I know if you look at your agenda tonight, there's quite a few items on there that are going to cost money. So I have a perspective of it from the Main Street thing. I also have a perspective as a taxpayer for the city. And my third aspect is my husband owns 2 buildings in the TIF district. One is a historic building, was put into the mixture of the TIF district, only one that is north of Pekin Street. So they went out of their way to make sure that's in there. So he pays taxes on that. And he also has the Goodyear building, so he pays taxes on that. Neither of those taxes have gone down. They have gone up steadily, even this year, which when you look at the fact that the downtown isn't quite what it was in 2012, 2013, those costs do not go down for the business owners. So they're still paying more TIF taxes on their tax bill than are other people. So I just want, you know, I think I've had a good perspective to look at all sides of these. And I think that not only with the property taxes the businesses pay and with the additional TIF taxes, that they deserve a lot of services and make sure that they do get the services. That doesn't necessarily cost any extra money, but they're there to be protected. And I know we have a concern. My husband's building, historic building, was broken in, demolished on the inside. And we have not even gotten a police report yet. And that was 4 months ago. So I just think that there's things that people out there can see that you don't necessarily see, and so I'm sharing those with you. Do any of you have any questions?
Thanks for bringing your questions forward, Wanda. I think a lot of people had the same questions, so thank you.
I gotta leave now, I'm sorry.
Okay, next up on the agenda is the request to permit, that's a road closure on Saturday, July 18th from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. at 112 South McLean Street in front of the Art Institute to the intersection of Pulaski Street for a memorial / art showing for Toby Prang, aka Moses Pinkerton. And Morgan will be speaking with us from the Tourism Bureau.
Good evening.
Hi, Morgan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the first, as Tracy said, we are very saddened to have to ask for the road closure, but it will be a very nice memorial in honor of Toby Moses. Anything else on that? Any questions on that?
I have no question.
Put that on the consent agenda, or?
Consent agenda. Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say I think this is great, and anybody who had the opportunity to know Toby, a.k.a. Moses, he's truly a blessing to this community, and what he did for the art community and the city is amazing, and so I think this is very appropriate, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll put that on the consent agenda then. Okay. And the next item up is also Morgan. She's going to talk to us about a request for financial assistance with the mill preservation. Morgan?
I also included a little handout. I'm sorry that stuff didn't make it in the agenda packet, but I included the brand new brochure that we just did this past month. We did get a state from the grant to do that. We were awarded $10,000, but because of COVID, it was cut short to about $1,900. But we were very pleased to design it and get some printed. And then next, I also included some history about the mill, just in case ones are not 100% familiar with it. It was built in 1929, and it was a restaurant until, it was the it was the Blue Mill until 1945 when the Huffmans bought it. And then it became very famous for the schnitzel sandwich, and it closed in 1996, and it was then abandoned until 2006 when the Route 66 Heritage Foundation of Logan County bought it and then restored it to what it is today. And it just needs more help. It needs more preservation done to it. And the Tourism Bureau took over ownership of the mill earlier this year in February. And we know that it is an asset to tourism. We know that leading up to the centennial of Route 66 in 2026, that there will be more and more and more travelers coming. And it is an original building on Route 66, and not very many other towns can say that they have that. I have included pictures of what it currently looks like, and then the bids that Matthews Construction gave to us. I did get multiple bids, and the tourism board went with these, so then that's why I only brought those forward. So we are looking for assistance to help keep preserving the mill.
Are there any questions for Morgan? Mr. Conzo, did you have questions?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Morgan. I've been through there several times, and it's certainly I mean, they've done a lot to it already, but it certainly needs more. But I don't have the handout, so I know you didn't have quite enough of them, but how much do you anticipate that is?
These bids are for about $31,000. It includes vinyl, new vinyl on the entire building. The concrete pad that's on the north side needed to be removed because it's sloping and causing water damage on the north side. And then there's a few spots inside that had water damage, and those need to be removed, and the flooring needs fixed. So in this amount, it's about $31,000.
See.
Mr. Keller?
Thank you, Mayor. So you are asking for financial assistance in the amount of?
I would like around $15,000.
And just a question on, and this is just more of a formality, so I have this straight. So as you mentioned, the Tourism Bureau took over ownership of the Mill Museum. So the funds you're requesting are out of the city and not from tourism. Am I correct?
These are from the extra hotel motel tax that the city has.
It's the, was it 10? What's the amount? What's the percentage we?
Hotel motel tax? We
90.
we retain 10%.
10%, right? So what you're requesting is the 15,000 to come out of the, again, I think you just mentioned, out of the money that we keep and not the money that goes in tourism. So how much is tourism committing to this project? Since, I guess my question is, since tourism took over the mill, shouldn't the Tourism Bureau be the first line of defense for paying for the mill preservation?
So I think,
Yes. We obviously, not obviously, you asked. So we commit 100% to paying this. But if we do not have to pay all of it, we could then afford to have heating and cooling system put in. And also with the virus, our funds have decreased. So it would be nice to make sure we do have some still in the savings if we need it.
Mr. Parrott?
Yeah, so the tourism board is 100% going forward with this. However, knowing that we have less funds coming in, knowing that some of the events that bring tourism in to the city, such as some of these sports events that weren't able to happen, probably won't be able to happen, you know, in the coming months as well. So we're and then losing some funds from the state as well. So we're looking for some help from the city, knowing that the city also wasn't able to use some of the tourism funds that they have from the hotel sales tax with the third Fridays and such. That this would be a good investment for the city, for the county, for tourism to come in, and for funds to be created from the Centennial coming in through the Route 66 progression, coming up. So, we were hoping as the board that the city would be able to help and be a partner in that as well, knowing that, tourism has done a pretty good job here of late with really trying to, move the tourism forward.
Mr. Conzo, can you Tell us how much is in that hotel motel tax fund.
Yes, Mayor, I can. It's about $60,000 balance currently in there. And, you know, we take in some each month and we pass along 90% of that to the Tourism Bureau. However, their revenues, you know, their hotel motel tax revenue is going to be down for several months due to this virus. And as a result, the amount of money that's being passed on to the Tourism Bureau is going to be down. So they're going to be operating with less money. The only purpose for that hotel motel tax is to promote tourism. So as I think I've said this a number of times before, we can't use it to buy gasoline for the vehicles and pay people's salaries or anything else like that. It's strictly to promote tourism. And as the economy comes back, we're going to need to do everything we can to promote tourism. I think that this is a good use of that money. There are other things too that we probably could do, but it doesn't really do any good to sit on a large balance in that account because they, you know, unlike others where, you know, we can invest it and maybe make some money or we can use it for something else. This has no other purpose, and so the thing to do with this is to use it wisely and to use it at a time when we can, when we need to use it, and I think this is one of those times. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Morgan, does the tourism board have any plans of doing any fundraising themselves?
As of right now, no. We are looking to expand the gift shop to, you know, make it profitable. But as of right now, no. The operational costs would just come from our budget, our yearly budget.
And part of what tourism did when they took over that building was they hired a part-time staff to be down at the property. I can't remember what those hours were or days, but there will be someone down there more often. So that then creates another opportunity to generate revenue from there. Mr. Bateman?
Being a former tourism board member, I'm in favor of this. My question is, in looking at the construction, you know, I agree with products that, you know, don't need to be maintained, so that helps you guys out in the long run. But the question I have is, are we going to try to recreate the historical accuracy of the colors of the building? You know, when you say vinyl siding, I just didn't want the general public to think that you're going to go out and buy white and all of a sudden a building that was multicolored just becomes a white building on the corner. I'm hoping that we can use the funds wisely and try to maintain some of the historical accuracy of the building while still maintaining it as maintenance free as you can.
Yes, we plan on still doing the red and white color scheme that's there now.
Has anybody thought about restoring the windmill itself?
Sail out front.
It is repaired or restored.
Does it turn like it used to? I'm old. I remember when it actually rotated.
Oh, I wasn't aware that it actually rotated.
I don't think the
So,
motor's
no.
operational.
No.
And one of the things that we talked in great detail about at tourism was when you're talking about the vinyl siding, we were actually talking about going with cedar at one point, and we ended up on vinyl simply because the hotel motel tax is a limited fund that tourism uses to operate, and we want to make sure whatever we do now actually lasts for as many years as possible. And vinyl gave us, I believe, Steve, was it 40 plus years is the estimate before we'd have to do any type of repairs. Obviously, we'll have to do cleaning and stuff like that. And then there was some other items that were on the building that just obviously made no sense that will be removed and sided over, but not from a major constructional point. It's like a set of stairs on the back, if I'm not mistaken, that goes to nowhere. So,
And that's where a lot of the water damage was coming in from anyway.
so Mr. Keller.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I guess I don't want my comments to be misunderstood and my questions earlier to be misunderstood because I'm a former tourism board member myself, former director of a historic and a tourism-related museum. And I believe firmly when the mill opened, I was there. I was a yes, it finally reopened. So I support the concept. I guess my question still goes back to ensuring, I understand this is for a tourism benefit, but what would prevent, I guess if we open the door to this, I'm just thinking more out loud, I'm not really necessarily questioning the validity of the need because I think it needs to be repaired, but if the Hawes elevator came, wanted $15,000 for repairs, the Elkhart Church, $15,000 for repairs, where do we stop? So I don't know if we need to begin to make a little bit more of a guidelines about this 10% or what, but I guess I just want to be sure if we do this, what we're opening the door for. And allowing the same sort of opportunity for anybody else who comes and wants the 15 or however many $1,000 as well, that we should feel we need to grant them too if they're a tourism-related site or a historic place in the county.
Morgan, can you share what the 3 types of grants are that are available at tourism?
Yes, so the Tourism Bureau gives out a preservation grant, an advertising grant, and a
Sponsorship, I believe.
sponsorship grant. Thank you. The sponsorships are for the sports teams that come in, and advertising, of course, is the events, and then preservation is, of course, preservation if the Mount Pulaski Courthouse needs some repairs, giving them grant money, things like that. And we've given the mill money when we did not own it for some of their repairs and operational costs and things like that.
Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to address Alderman Keller's point, I think you have to evaluate the request based on the merit of those requests. I guess maybe that's an oversimplification, but I think you do. I think this, when we know the value of this property and the historic place that it holds in the history of our city and our county, and I think it's worthwhile. It's conceivable you will get other requests that are worthwhile, and you have to look at A, the fund balance at the time, and B, the cost of what they're asking for, and see whether it really meets a criteria of being a historic property. And I guess that's kind of how I would summarize it. But I think this certainly meets that criteria.
Mr. Parrott.
Morgan, can you share the estimated completion of this project? Do we know yet? Do we know when he can start and when do you know when, is there an estimated completion for the project, when it will start and when it will be finished?
Some repairs began earlier this month, and we expect to open up spring of next year. So I would assume late fall, early spring.
So it'll be sited in the fall?
Unless they can get to it sooner.
Okay, thank you.
So what do you guys want to do with this, Mr. Hornicky?
Yeah, just one, excuse me, one quick comment. Just for the agenda purpose, when we go to put this on the agenda, I'd just like to have it spelled out for the public that it is money from hotel motel tax, so they're not under the assumption that it's coming from the general fund or something like that. So, agreed.
What would you like to do with this?
Put it on the agenda.
For
And what amount?
15,000.
Place it on the regular agenda? Okay, thank you, Morgan.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, the street sign, the Chicago and Broadway street sign next to the depot was repaired. And I'm sure Walt had a lot to do with that since I have complained a lot. And it looks great. So thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. Okay, moving down the agenda. Item number 6 is Crawford Murphy and Tilly invoice for professional services from May 2nd, 2020 to May 29, 2020 for the CSO improvement construction phase services in the amount of $3,277.50. Mr. Bateman?
I'd like to put this on the agenda. These next items are just phases in the CSO construction project. If we need someone to come forward next week and explain exactly what they are, but they're basically explained out here in fairly decent detail, as they are on the agenda. These are just items as part of the big project. It's not additional monies we're spending. It's just as the bills come in and the projects move forward, we're bringing them forward as needed.
Mr. Parrott? Yeah, so number 6 is the CSO improvement construction, which is out at the wastewater treatment facility. Number 7 is also for professional services for the Union Street pump station construction, which is taking place down on Union Street as part of that effort in the amount of $17,048.88. Number 8 is for wastewater treatment plant property boundary determination in the amount of $6,192.73. That particular item stems from when we were having discussions about how to access the property for the CSO improvement project. We ran into a number of issues, and one of those is we didn't know what our boundaries were as far as what we owned, what adjacent property owners owned, etc. So they were asked to complete that work so that we had accurate information to make a good, educated decision on how to move forward with access on that property. So that's an explanation for those. Number 9 is for the Fifth Street reconstruction per agreement in the amount of $5,017.30. And so the Fifth Street reconstruction, Beth, that's part of redesign work, correct?
This was to CMT. This is for the land acquisition, their work on that through for May, through May 29th, 2020.
So it says for reconstruction, part of the agreement. I don't have
On
the
the
packet.
invoice, it says agreement for land acquisition services for the city of Lincoln for Fifth Street Road project, or street reconstruction.
Okay, well, let's back up a minute. Let's go to number 6. What do you guys want to do with the CSO improvement professional services?
On the agenda.
Place on the agenda, yes.
Number 7 for the Union Street pump station construction,
Agenda.
regular agenda. Number 8 for the wastewater treatment boundary determination work,
Agenda.
regular agenda. Okay. Number 9. What would you like to do with number 9?
Place on the agenda, and then we'll have to vote. I mean, it's an invoice.
Okay, we'll clarify that if we need to later. Number 10, let's move down to that. Curb and sidewalk replacement project bid award to Knapp Concrete Contractors in the amount of $101,000, $284.50. Walt, do you want to speak to this one as well as the scarification and the mill overlay?
Basically, the bids were opened on July 2nd for all 3 projects. For the sidewalk project, we had 3 bidders. Autobahn, Morton, Kenny Contractors of Raymond, Illinois, and then Nat Contractors of Goodfield, Illinois. With Nat being the lowest at $101,284.50. You want me to go through all 3 of them while I'm on here, or?
What do you want to do with the curb and gutters?
Agenda.
Regular agenda? Okay. All right, Walt, number 11, the scarification oil and chip.
I think there's a time delay.
Okay, for the scarification and oil and chip project, we had 2 bids, with the low bid being Vintage Construction of Tuscola, Illinois at $236,756.50. The other bidder was P.H. Broughton and Son of Springfield, Illinois, and their bid come in at $275,985.66. Bennett has been awarded an scarification oil and chip program bids for probably the last 4 years. So we really like working with this company, and they do a good job.
Place that on the regular agenda. Okay. And Walt, number 12, the mill and overlay.
For the mill and overlay project, that we received 3 bids. The low bid coming from PH Broughton & Son at $252.84. The other 2 bidders were Illinois Valley Paving at Springfield. Their bid was $267,282.92. And Truman Flat & Son out of Springfield with a bid of $277,725.50. Again, Broughton's a company that we've worked with for the past couple of years. They did the mill and overlay last year on South Kickapoo Street, and another company that I have a lot of faith in. So looking forward to getting these projects going and getting them completed.
Sam.
I had a question, Walt. I was thinking that our road construction budget that we only allowed for like $450,000-ish in there, but when I add up these amounts, it's closer to $500,000. Am I incorrect in that?
With the 2, we had $125,000 in the budget for the sidewalk project, and then we had $500,000 in the resurfacing project budget. You have to remember that we approved using $40,000 out of the sewer enterprise fund for the section of 4th Street and Decatur Street where the sewer repairs were done last December. So we were able to use part of those funds.
Okay, so
For that. So that was $40,000. And then we also have another little over $30,000 in rebate from, or reimbursement from Illinois American Water that we received that we could also use for resurfacing. We're probably looking at about $20,000 to $25,000 left in the budget, and we may be bringing other targets forward. So there will be more information coming forward on that.
okay, thank you, sir.
Place this on the regular agenda.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, Walt. Okay, moving down to number 13, the COPS Hiring Program Award grant of $125,000 in federal funds over a 3-year period. Chief Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. So, out of all the agencies in Illinois that applied for this grant, we were one of 22 that actually got awarded this grant. So, yeah, that's huge. Now, the caveat is when we talked about going forward with this grant back in several months ago, I think Alderman Parrott brought it up that, you know, even if we got the grant, do we still want to make sure we go forward with it, given the funds and the issues with the current budget? So, so this is $125,000. Salaries and fringe benefits for officer over the 3 years would be $232,843.32. So the federal share only pays $125,000 over that 3 years. So that means we're going to have to come up with $107,843 over that 3 years to pay for that officer. Now, this year in the budget, I've already accounted for that in our salaries line. So it's in our budget at this point. But we have to remember that we have to continue to pay for this even after the funds run out in 3 years. So that was an issue, I think, that happened back in 2001 or 2000 when Beth was here, that we actually had to lay off because we didn't account for those officers and those pay raises. And plus, of course, the economy crashed at that time also. So we're in that gray area where, you know, as Chuck likes to say, we need to be careful on our spending. So, but this is a $125,000 grant. There was, again, I stress the point that we are one of 22 agencies that actually applied and got this. I believe Logan County applied for 2 and were denied for both. So, so I hate to give up $125,000 of free federal money. And I believe we have it budgeted for this year to move forward with. And then after 3 years, if we can't, we're going to have retirements coming out. We're going to have a lot of retirements over the next few years, I can tell you that much.
So if we accept this grant, we're required to keep that officer on for 3 years, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, is it possible to delay the hiring till later in the fiscal year?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the funds are available after we, number one, accept the award. I haven't accepted the award. We have 45 days to accept the award, so I'm waiting for your approval to move forward for that acceptance. Once we accept the award, according to the documentation we have, actually we can apply for and get the grant now and get the funds and hire the officer effective July 1st. But problem is I'm running into is hiring somebody and getting them through an academy or hiring off the next applicant off of our lateral list who technically isn't eligible until October. So October, or I can hire and send somebody to the academy, but then we're looking at 6 months before that person's actually even usable on the street. So
Mr. Bateman?
So if we approve this, we could technically wait till October when you could bring someone off the lateral list.
Correct.
And then we just, as you said, we know for a fact there's going to be some retirements in the next 3 years. So I don't think this is much as a gamble as it sounds like it is, because we would have vacancies anyway and a lower payroll. Because obviously the person retiring would be at a much higher salary than a new person coming in that we would have to replace them. So I think it's a good idea to utilize this grant money, and but I would like to do the wait till October and come off the lateral list. Then we might have a better snapshot of what our lockdown economy or open economy would look like at that point.
I agree. Alderman Parrott?
What's the stipulations as far as the expectation for is it just hiring another police officer for the force, or what is the?
So the stipulations of this grant were there was 2 applications that you could move forward with. One is a school resource officer. The other one's a violent crimes investigator. So we already have our school resource officers that we need. So we went for the violent crimes, and actually the president's initiative for this COPS grant and the last COPS grant has been for violent crimes, to help reduce violent crimes in our nation. So this officer is actually, I'm going to use this officer as a violent crime investigator / community policing officer. So they're going to be doing both. What I want them to do is try to think of ideas and formulate plans and work with the community on helping solve those violent crimes without actually having to investigate them. So hopefully prevent them rather than investigating. So it's kind of a dual approach.
So would a first-year police officer take on that type of responsibility, or
no, that's going to be, I'm going to pull somebody else from the street and then replace this into that street application. So no, I wouldn't hire straight off the street to put into this. No, this would be an experienced officer going into that violence crime position, but this officer will fill that vacancy on the street.
So place the accepting the bid award or the grant award on the regular agenda?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next item on the agenda is the proposal for the City of Lincoln Diversity and Inclusion Committee. This is something that I took to Alderman Keller a few weeks back. I asked him if he would do some brainstorming and come up with some ideas on how we could get the community a little bit more engaged and see how they could provide a voice into the things that we do up here, so that we start to truly represent the community. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ron and let him share what he's put together on this.
Thank you, Mayor. As he said, I credit the Mayor Welch for initiating the conversation. And I also thank City Administrator Cavalman, Attorney John Hoblet as well for providing some very helpful insight into the creation of this. Now, this is really precipitated, obviously, by recent national events that have struck our country, and we need to definitely ensure that our community takes proactive measures to ensure that we're a welcoming community, that we recognize diversity, that we're receptive to all different demographic groups as well as needs. There's a lot of people that I think we're an attractive community, and we need to make ourselves more attractive to anybody and everybody who comes in. So we want to make sure that this city takes those measures to ensure that we appreciate and recognize and welcome those different types of people. And I will say, even though, as I said, that this is precipitated by recent national events, the word diversity, in my opinion, and I think this is shared by everybody who is part of this, diversity has many different meanings. And so, as we even talked about in our groups, in our meetings before, when we brainstormed the ideas for this, diversity doesn't have to be racial. It can be age. It can be disabilities. And we've talked about the park and having the playgrounds, ensure that we recognize the playgrounds for those with disabilities. That's diversity. It can be youth diversity to ensure that our college students feel welcome when they come into the community. So it can be veterans, to make sure that our veterans are appreciated, applauded, recognized, and the needs they have are met as well. So you have in your packet some proposal items that we have for you to ruminate and to talk about if we need to. Again, this would be a commission. This would be drawn up as a resolution, and Attorney Hoblet can address that if he wants to. But it would be an official commission. We'll also say that this is actually not a new idea. Administrator Cavalman reminded us, which I had forgotten, that when she was mayor, there was what was it called, Beth?
Mayor's Commission on Disabilities, Minorities, Seniors, Veterans, and Youth.
Okay, so that sort of thing precedes us. It went by the wayside, so we'd like to bring it back. I think it's necessary to bring it back. So it'd be a commission that would operate like our other city commissions. No money would be expended for it, but it would be made up of residents in our city that do represent the different demographic groups. So there it is. So I don't know, John, if you want to say anything about the resolution. I know you and I had a little conversation about it. If not, that's fine, but I'll open up for any other comments anybody has.
Mr. Hoblet?
Yes, as this will be an official committee/commission of sorts, we'll need a resolution. Since they're not going to have any spending powers, it doesn't need to be an ordinance. I believe I will put within there the representations that are made or that were made previously. We just need to affix, as to what's the cap of the membership. I believe we talked about that they would be providing various recommendations to the council. So essentially, I need to outline as to what those recommendations will be, the powers of said commission or whatnot. It depends on how you want to define them, but I believe Mr. Keller has included some of that information. So we have a good ground point to go off from here. But I can create if you were to opt to put this on a voting meeting, I believe I could put forth a resolution in quicker order, just due to the legwork that was done by Alderman Keller.
Put this on the agenda? Consent agenda?
That's a question for the attorney. Can you do this by next week?
So long as you're willing to speak with me to iron out any questions I might have, Alderman Keller, I can have this ready.
You have my number.
You can always table.
If not, we could table it and work out. You could bring something forward. We could add or subtract, and if we have to rework it to bring it back, I'd rather get it right the first time.
Okay.
But we at least need something to discuss on that we look at voting at.
So why don't we just bring this back in 2 weeks with the official resolution that's prepared by the city attorney, then we'll go from there. So they'd be in the CAL for
Next cow. Okay.
July 28th.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the ordinance authorizing the sale of real estate. Mr. Hoblet, can you speak to this one?
Yes, you guys previous on a voting meeting immediately previous to this, I indicated that whereas you guys are accepting the bid, there still needed to be an ordinance made up for this. That ordinance was obviously not timely put forth before this council, and you guys went ahead and voted. So the ordinance is there now for you guys to approve the sale of said real estate. The ordinance in there essentially indicates it's very similar to the ordinance that went out for bid. It's the same descriptor of the property, but it just indicates towards the end that only one bid was submitted, and that was from Illinois American Water. It was red, the cow that it was red on, and I believe it's in the best interest of constituents. And I probably could also add a paragraph in there also indicating that the bid was in fact already accepted by the council on, and I could cite the voting meeting from which it took place. So that, so I could probably add that paragraph, which honestly for purposes of being, I guess in the interest of disclosure, you probably should do that. But yes, this essentially is just cementing what was done previously. These ordinances are necessary to pass before any action can take forth thereafter.
Place this on the consent agenda.
Consent, it's an ordinance.
Regular?
Yeah.
Okay. Place it on the regular agenda. Okay, moving down to number 16, the ordinance establishing the City of Lincoln Economic Development Grant Program and Economic Development Commission. Ms. Cavalman, would you like to speak to this one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a program that, as we heard Mrs. Ross talk earlier about it, this is a program that we're trying to do something for all the distressed buildings in the community, and kind of falls on the footfalls of what we've been trying to do with the COVID-19 restoration, if we can, to help individuals and businesses that need the help. And it's going to be a good program. It's going to maybe be a slow start, but if we could get the council to put the $60,000 in appropriations or keep it in the fund for the year, we're encouraging individuals that want to buy some of these properties and refurbish them, get them back, get the structures back. We've had some not too many good things going on in a couple of the properties, and we've had to go in and do some things. And it's not in the city's best interest to own all these properties. So if we could get this downtown area started first and help it come back and shine and look like it used to be, and help an individual that's trying to put a roof on one of these distressed buildings, try to get some structure done. Maybe needs some more work done to the piping, the electricity, something, but go step by step, and it will be very much watched. We will see that everyone has to do the work ahead of time, as you spoke before, and turn in their receipts, and this will all go through this commission to double check, and the city council has a final say on things. So I think it's a good program. I don't think we have anything to lose other than to gain and to help our individual businesses.
Ron.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just a comment and a question to follow up to Administrator Cavalman. When we talked about this in planning this idea, Ms. Rolfs earlier did say, we obviously need to be mindful this is taxpayer money, which is correct. But as Administrator Cavalman reminded us, these are properties which right now are in pretty poor shape. And if we get these up and running, that's more money for sales taxes and more revenue that will be coming back into our community. This is why we call it economic development, because I do think this is going to pay off for us. So I think this is a great idea. One question I did have, because we threw around a lot of ideas as we were planning this. So to the ordinance, and I want to make sure that this is what we do want. It says, whereas the City of Lincoln, blah, 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 establishes $7,500 for each property owner in a given year. So my question is that the way we want it? Or if there is, for instance, someone with a little bit of capital, an investor who has two different properties, who can refurbish both in that given year. A property owner means he or she can only do one of those. Do we want to have that cap, or can it be property owner per property location? I'm just throwing that out.
Mr. Hoblet.
I believe that's the way it's already phrased within there, is that the property owner, if there's a property owner that owns two different properties, then he's a property owner of one property and he's a property owner of another property.
Okay,
So-
I didn't know how that could be interpreted, because when I read that, I thought that's what we meant, but when I
Right.
read that, I saw one property owner in a given year. I'm not sure that's clear, the way it's written out there.
Okay.
Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mayor. Alderman Keller, I believe on the second page it is clarified further, though, under paragraph 2, line or subsection E. Funding shall be limited to $7,500 per business each fiscal year. So I think that clarifies that.
Okay, it does. All right, yeah. Thank you.
So do we need to modify that language from business to property owner? Remember we had that discussion?
Right. Yeah. That probably was one that that correction did not happen. But there should be, within this ordinance, there should be reflected property owner instead of business, because the business it could be there's a business operating within the building that is not the actual property owner. So that's why the specification of property owner is important within this particular ordinance. Yes.
Ms. Kaplan.
Yes, so in subsection E, where you say business, that word will be changed to property owner.
Yes.
Okay, and I did want to say it looked like one little correction on the top. When it says an ordinance creating.
I'm aware. I'm very
Sorry.
much aware that my country lingo came out on the top part of there. So yes, that'll be corrected.
Mr. Bateman.
So I had brought up, and it was discussed, are we going to cement or I'm like Mr. Keller, I'm reading it. It kind of sounds what I said last week, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't say that if toward the end of the fiscal year, we only have 3 applicants, are we going to make a provision there where we spend the entire $60,000 each fiscal year? Because a lot of these buildings, as I said before, need a lot more than $7,500, and I'm not in favor of giving the entire 60 to one person, but if they have structural problems and we give them $7,500 and they bring the receipt and we pay them, and then 4 months later there's another project in rehabilitating that building that they could use some help on, and there's still funds left, I would like to see that they could come back a second time in that fiscal year and ask for additional monies, to complete the next phase of that project, instead of dragging these things on for years to try to get these buildings up on the tax roll. I do think the $60,000 is well invested, because as we know, as these buildings get refurbished, they're assessed every single year. So realistically, the property taxes would increase based on what the property is worth at the time. So I think we can get our $60,000 back over time. I just think if we're going to invest that kind of money, let's invest that kind of money and make it to where we're truly investing the full amount each year into businesses, and come up with some way of doing that.
Mr. Hoblet.
I left a paragraph within there that says that I tried to take that into contemplation when making this ordinance. There's, I believe, the bottom of the first page indicates that in a whereas that that the full 60 is not given within a given year or used, and if the council and the city has the money to do it, and then they can consider doing that. There's also another consideration further down below. I believe the idea was to keep this at one project a time so like if one property owner has one project, so that there's also another consideration the council needs to consider. It's just that let's say we do grant the money to a business. Let's say it goes up to $30,000. Okay. And so now we have one business that has $30,000, and let's say the next year or within a year, the property owner says, I want to do another project, and I just want the $7,500. And it's like, well, they're going to be a a little miffed maybe that is, well, you gave one guy this 30,000, and all I'm asking is just for another 7,500. That only comes up to about 15,000. That's like half of what the other person was getting. What's the problem? So there's additional considerations that kind of go along with that too. When you want to give one business more, and you probably, if you're going to be doing that, you probably need to have very defined reasons as to why. So you're not showing any type of favoritism to a particular business. That would give off a very bad look, I believe, to the council, if that were the case. So there's additional considerations that go along with this when you go down that route. I just want to make sure the council does their due diligence when you are discussing these issues or contemplating these issues.
Mr. Parrott?
How many buildings are not being used in the downtown, and how many does the city own? I mean, and if the city owns some, I think I'd like to go look at them.
Ms. Calvin, go ahead.
At one time, we have about 40 properties. Now, I'm not certain. I'm talking about that the city owns. Now, I don't know if that's exactly correct because the list we have is older. We've got to go research that a little bit further. But we do have the properties downtown, you know, the older ones that are sitting vacant that look like they need some loving care. Those are the ones we're focusing on. It's the ones that we've already gotten listed on the MLS. So if you can get a copy of that, or I can get a copy, I've given that to you before, but this is the updated one I received today. And they're different ones owned by different people, and they're being sold. And if somebody would like to buy them off of the MLS, they'd contact a local realtor, and they would purchase them, and we'd try to do something to help them. But they all have to go through a stringent application process. And we're working on the application. We'll have that ready to go maybe at the next meeting for you to look at.
I think Mr. Parent was inquiring as to whether some of those buildings that are in not really good shape downtown are owned by the city of Lincoln, which is not correct.
No. No.
Yeah, they're owned, most of those are owned by people that have bought up the taxes for the past few years. Some of them are now at that third year stage, and other people are buying them up now at tax sales. So, Mr. Harnicky?
Yeah, I would like to try to keep it simple this first year and see how the program works, and maybe work any kinks out that come through the pipeline and stuff. And then if we only have 2 or 3 that are interested, the remainder of the money could be rolled over maybe into next year. And then instead of 7,500, it could be, 10,000 that they get awarded. We could up it that way. That way you're not picking and choosing at the end of the year. And we could just maybe improve on the program next year even more then. That'd be one option. The other question real quick I had was at the top, it has defined as, I'll get it here real quick, especially within the downtown area. And so do we need to really define, by this street and that street and things of that nature? So
I just put that in there because
right.
It seems like the whole impetus for creating this was some of these downtown buildings that are severe state of disrepair. But I can remove that language. And furthermore, if you guys want to keep it simple, I could also remove the paragraph with the additional, essentially the last paragraph of the first page. So
I think the catch-all though in this is it says prospective commercial property, so it has to be a actual commercial property. It can't be a residential within the downtown. So
Yeah, so I think we can.
right, right.
Yeah, I think we can strike the thing about downtown, because the idea is it's for the entire city, as I mentioned when Ms. Rawls was here. And Mr. Bateman, when Ms. Rawls was here also, I mentioned that the idea was to get these grants approved months ahead of time so that they had an opportunity to complete the work before the end of the fiscal year. I'm not disputing what you mentioned about if we have extra money, create opportunities for people to use that money as well. I don't know how we would do that though without going into the next fiscal year. We wouldn't even give them enough time to complete the project. So we would have to think about how that would work. Did you have another comment, Mr. Bateman?
Well, now you brought up a good one. So, the money would be allocated, in my opinion, if they came forward before the end of the fiscal year, and they say hey, I need another $10,000 worth of repair. This is what we're going to do. On a council vote, that would allocate that $10,000. It just wouldn't, it wouldn't roll over. We wouldn't make them get it done before the end of the fiscal year. That money would already be allocated and just sitting in the fund. So when they brought in the receipts, then we know that money was already voted on and approved by the council for the additional monies. That's what I was getting at.
Ms. Cavalman?
Yeah, so Alderman Bateman, you're then tying into what Alderman Heineke said about carrying money over from year to year. Is that what you're kind of getting towards?
Well, I mean, if nobody comes forward, then yes, carry the money over. But what I'm getting at from what Mrs. Rolfs and Mr. Welch just said is, if it's coming toward the end of the fiscal year and we vote the extra money to whoever, that money is then allocated. It doesn't disappear at the end of the fiscal year. Technically, it doesn't roll over either because it's already allocated for that person when they turn in those receipts.
So the language would simply have to say that the application has to be approved prior to the end of the fiscal year.
Correct. The application for the money would have to be voted on and approved before the end of the fiscal year. That locks that dollar amount in for that individual upon completion of whatever project. Because some of these projects are going to take quite a while. I mean, some of these buildings are in grave disrepair. So, even forcing them to try to get it done in a fiscal year might be a stretch. So I just think by voting and allocating the money, it just sits there and they get the receipts turned in. We cut them the check.
Mr. Parrott, did you have a comment? Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you, Mayor. To address the Alderman Bateman's point there, and Alderman Honaki's point, we can do it that way, but what we have to be sure to do is to budget that. So maybe you're going to budget $60,000 for the next year with the intention that other businesses would use that. Well, you still got these two projects out there that aren't completed. You're going to have to add that $15,000 in to do that. So it's going to make a difference in how you budget it. But so it doesn't just automatically carry over. It's something would have to be actually spelled out in the budget.
Mr. Hoblet?
Then maybe the language needs to be changed up further, because it sounds like to me, from what you're kind of gathering, that instead of having a maximum of 7,500, I think most businesses will probably read it as a minimum of 7,500, because they can get, because 7,500 is not going to be, it's not unlike a college scholarship where a student would receive $1,000. Obviously that's not going to pay for the entirety of the college, but it'll help out. That's kind of like what we're seeing here. 7,500 probably won't come close to paying for the entirety of the project, but it'll help out. But it's you're kind of putting a lot of questions and unknowns in there as well, because essentially a business would apply for this, and then they're going to be like, well, let's see what happens until the end of the year, and then they will fight amongst each other for additional funding, and bicker amongst each other for additional funding as well. These are things that might happen. So you guys need to try to have this buttoned up as much as possible when you try to do this, because you might run into a situation where you have some people that ask for the additional funds, but we awarded additional funds to somebody else in lieu of them, and just for the sake of not having a terrible optics issue, you probably should have this defined out as to how a person would get those additional funds if there's going to be additional funds available, and have that process ironed out as well, so there's no discrepancy.
Mr. Bateman?
So could that just simply change the wording that the original or first, or however you want to word it, application is $7,500? That way you don't have someone coming forward asking for 20 right up the bat. Their original application would be $7,500. And then additionals would be discussed among the council as needed. So their one-time first ask is $7,500 or less.
And then all subsequent are discretionary. Thoughts on that, Mr. Hoblet? Did you have thoughts on that?
I mean, I can put it in there. It's just that the council should be prepared to be inundated with additional requests at some juncture. But I'll put that in there if the council wants me to.
We are inundated with additional requests, because then that means people are fixing up these buildings.
Mr. Arnicky?
But yeah, the other part of that is when the 60,000's gone, it's gone. I mean, if people can ask for additional all they want, but if it's not there, it's not there too, so.
Yep, ask early. So how would you like to proceed with this one?
Put it on the next cow, reword it.
Okay. We'll bring it back on the 28th. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2020 to 2021. Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you, Mayor. I think you've all received the copies of it in the agenda packet as well as previous printings of this. As I pointed out last time, there are a few changes. I think they're self-explanatory. I did, after listening to Alderman Bateman, I think he made a pretty good argument there about the video gaming tax. And I do think it's going to come back, but it might not come back as quickly as I had hoped. So I did increase the deficit there to 69,000 based on the previous trends, or the decrease at $69,044. I also did include what I had not previously included was money for the sale of property that was not included in there, so that kind of helps offset that to some extent. And if you look through the rest of it, you'll see some little notes on the side there and asterisks. You see a land acquisition, $1,000 there that had not been previously included under the contingencies on page 4. In addition to that, let's see, the next one I believe is, the economic development grant. I did put the 60,000 in there, anticipating, and that's on page 7 under economic planning and development. I put that 60,000 in there, anticipating that you would approve that. The program will still have to be approved regardless of what you put in the appropriation, of course. And then there is on page 9, Rebuild Illinois. We did add that money, and we did not know about that at the time we did the original budget, and we do know now that we've received the first installment of that as Superintendent Landers has reported, and we should receive another payout on that in the next, during the current fiscal year. And then on page 12, I added the $40,000 for the street repairs on 4th Street there near Carroll Catholic that we're going to be able to pay out of the sewer fund. And that pretty well summarizes most of it. There's there's one more thing. The page 14, the grant repayment, we may end up having to pay part of that library parking lot grant for reasons that I described previously, and we're still waiting to hear from DCEO on that. I would make one additional change on page 13. We have $325,000 transferred from the general fund to the capital project fund based on possibility of the non-home rule sales tax not coming in as well as we'd like, or not receiving as much, and you see you have reduced the projection there. I would recommend maybe adding another 50,000 to 75,000 into that transfer as needed, only if needed, for the street and sidewalk targets would be.
Any concerns with that? Okay. So the additional funds that the treasurer is asking for to be added, are you guys okay with that?
It would be as needed.
1,000?
50,000, yeah.
Ms. Kavelman.
Yes, this just came in too, and I did send that into, off to you yesterday, or it might have been, it was late Friday, but Lincoln, Illinois has been allocated, or well, had been proposed up to $568,000 for the cures for the coronavirus. 19 anything involving our municipality, our city, that we have incurred the expenses. So I will need all those from the department heads, but I don't know if we should put that in there yet or not. But we are allowed up to $568,000 reimbursement from the state.
Mr. Treasurer.
But we have to turn in our receipts.
City Administrator Kavelman did want to ask, are they anticipating paying out anything for lost revenues? Or I know you had asked for that, but they won't.
No, but anything else that shows, any kind of medical expenses, anything we've had to use, or if we've got a special unit that we've used for just COVID-19 prevention or for, maintenance or something that we've used to help the citizens, we can use that.
Any other questions on this? So then place this on the regular agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Place it on the regular agenda. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion about the cruise in. Mr. Bateman, would you like to share that with us?
So, as we all know, everybody's looking for stuff to do desperately. And being a car enthusiast myself, I used to be in the motorcycle group thing, and then now I'm in the Jeep thing, and we've missed a lot of our Jeep cruises. So what I am just doing is giving information, because there is a possibility. It has been discussed in other car circles. It has already been done twice, and in Clinton, Illinois, with great success. These particular groups, just on social media, throw it out there that they're heading to a certain town, and luckily for us, we are one of those towns that's been mentioned. Usually they end up in these smaller communities with the downtown districts and a lot of privately owned businesses and quaint little shops and pubs and restaurants. So this is more of an informational type thing that the word is circulating in some of these groups, Jeep groups, Corvette groups, Mustang groups and such, that there might be an influx of classic or unique vehicles that may show up on August 27th, the Friday night of the Balloon Festival scheduled for downtown. I don't know of any street closures or anything that would ever come forward. A lot of times they just meet up at previous determined, like the bowling alley or a car dealership or such. These groups meet up at those places, and then they pick a particular time and they just head to they flood the local downtown area with cars, and they get out of their cars and socialize and visit the establishments in that town. I think it's a great thing. They're all very conscious of the coronavirus. They social distance. They all carry their masks with them. I just shared one the other day for Plainfield, Illinois. It was a car club, and they put out on their thing that, we're heading to Plainfield, Illinois at this time, heading downtown. Make sure you are aware that some businesses require you to wear a mask. Keep your mask available, maintain social distancing, be polite. And it's just the automotive and motorcycle group enthusiasts' way of supporting local businesses, because a lot of these people are local business owners, and they feel the need to support these kind of places. And like I said, I just wanted this to be an informational thing that if you hear conversation out in public, if you happen to belong to a certain group or know people in a certain group, there may be a lot of cars show up on that night, and just park and walk and take in whatever's going on in the town at that time. I believe the last month that they did it in Clinton, Illinois, not to scare everybody, I think the number was close to 500 cars showed up. So again, it's just one of those informational things. I wanted to be transparent about it because I do belong to one of those groups. I'll mention it several times with my 217 Jeep squad, and we'll just hope that we get a crowd downtown to support these local businesses that are in need of an influx of customers while still maintaining the social distances. And as everybody knows, and I've been asked, yes, it's a moving target. You know, if we get locked down, we get locked down. But right now, you know, we're talking a month away, so I just wanted to bring that forward as just some information. If anybody's got any questions, they can contact me. And if you own a classic car and have a group that might want to participate in getting organized, just go right ahead.
Can you, or if you're aware of anybody that can, reach out to the Rail Splitter Antique Auto Club and let them know about this too?
I
They'd
sure
love to
can.
participate.
Most of it's done on Facebook. That's the way most of it happens, but we can reach out to them and just, like I said, at this point, there's no asking for any street closures or anything like that. They'll just utilize the parking spaces that are downtown. I've been to a few where we've, you know, you get smaller vehicles like motorcycles and Jeeps will kind of look the other way on the lines and get as many vehicles as we can park in an area. But it works out pretty good.
And that's on the 28th, correct?
The 28th of August is what the discussion is because of the balloon festival. So we knew that there would be something going on that they could partake in. And like I said, a lot of these, they meet on the outskirts of town. So if there's a flyover or whatever, that would help. I reached out to Seth and got some times of the glows and stuff. So if people have questions, we can just, there's no official organization, I guess is what this is. It's just a group of people getting together and enjoy what they do.
Can we also, it's not on here, but we learned about a request yesterday that was put forward. Can you explain the request, the road closure request?
So yesterday, we got a request, or it came in today, for Friday, August 28th. Spirited Republic is asking to close Pulaski Street from the intersection of Kickapoo to the arcade, a half a block, kind of like we voted on last week for the Alibi. They've got a band scheduled to play that evening. I don't remember what times the band was. 7 to 10. I believe it's Harmony Grits, the band that was scheduled to play for Third Fridays. So they're asking for next week to vote for that street closure. Obviously, we would ask for Walt to bring some barricades down, that they would take care of the barricades themselves, and they would make sure the streets are open at 11 o'clock, and the band would play at that intersection, kind of like that happened a couple Fridays ago for the Alibi. And this is just another event that is trying to piggyback onto the Balloon Festival, another small business trying to promote outside socializing with the same respect that the other establishments had.
Yeah, and we want to be very clear about it. They explain that they will emphasize social distancing, 6 feet. The tables will be spaced apart appropriately. People will be asked to wear a mask while they're indoors, at the bar, getting anything. The things that we've come accustomed to in Phase 3 and Phase 4. Mr. Parrott.
So this was a band that Third Fridays had set up?
Yes, Third Fridays had booked them, so they were already scheduled for that weekend. Obviously, Third Fridays isn't going to happen. So
The city paid for that?
No.
No, they are going to purchase the contract from the city,
Oh, okay.
and they're gonna assume the contract and pay for that.
Yeah, they just, it was a band already scheduled. It was brought up in a conversation, and we're like, well, we already had a band scheduled. We could reach out to them, so they've agreed to purchase the contract. And I believe Harmony Grits has agreed to play that evening. I think it's an additional hour than what the contract was, but this is Spirited Republic asking for this. There would be no city funds dispersed.
Right, because I think the city was on the tab for this group, and so I just thank you for the clarification, because people could have taken it that the city was paying for this, and it was going, okay, thank you.
Which means we spent $0 on Third Friday this year. So there's more money that's in the fund for our discussion that we had earlier. So
We did use money for the fences and stuff for the outside dining. We did take that at the Third Friday, so, but not very much.
fencing
Didn't.
stuff, fencing. Mr. Bateman.
While we're on that downtown topic, I mentioned it before, and I'd like to mention it again. It is quite obvious to the people that are utilizing it and taking it in that outdoor seating is a real joy and issue for this town, and I think we need to, once we get the budget, the appropriations passed and stuff, and I'll keep an eye on a couple of these cows. If we get some shorter ones, that we can throw something out there for working on something for an outdoor seating arrangement for next year, because a couple of the establishments just, they have seen an influx of their business based on the fact that people just like to sit outside. I mean, it's amazing to me. You drive by the arcade on a Saturday morning, and that hallway is packed, and Gazzardo's and Spirited and Alibi and Rio Grande, and they're really enjoying it. And I think the city needs to go a long way to try to help these businesses out that don't have a resource for outdoor seating, to try to accommodate that. It's worked in other cities, large cities, and I think it's a really good thing. And I think we need to try to help these businesses out, because let's face it, we're all looking at the new normal. Even if there's a vaccine, I think we're going to be, all our lives are changed and our perceptions have changed on how we do things.
Okay, so we'll place this on the consent agenda, the road closure request. Okay. All right, thanks, Mr. Bateman. And then, Chief Danofsky, did you have a announcement that you'd like to share? I think you had an agenda item.
There he is.
There you go. We can see you.
Sent an email out to everybody from Dennis Bruns from Lincoln Land Communications. We already budgeted money for 3 siren battery enclosures for 3 of the outdoor warning devices for a total of $5,137. That should be in the ESDA fund. I'm also asking, talked with Chuck, we can take money out of the GEO bond. Total cost $10,787, and replace the decommissioned siren that's out by Mayfair on North Kickapoo Street. I would need council approval for that. Along with that, I'd have to talk to Ameren and have them restore power to a pole that's there. I just learned today that the pole's not in great shape, so we'd have to take the old pole down, see if Ameren would help us out and put a new pole up so it would properly seat the new outdoor warning device. The reason I'm bringing both of these things at the same time to the council is Dennis requires a down payment of 50% up front, but if we pay the whole bill up front, he'll give us a discount on the price. So I'll let you guys, if you have any questions, you can ask, or I'm not sure how we move forward on it, whether it goes onto the agenda to be voted on or what have you.
So the first item that you'd talk about is the battery replacement?
Yeah, we've already budgeted money for that in the ESDA account, so those are
The three battery enclosures are, they were needing to be replaced last year. We didn't have the money, so we put that in the budget this year.
What's that amount again?
$5,137.
Any objections to putting that on the regular agenda? Okay, we'll put that one on the regular agenda, Bob. And then the second one will be use of the GEO bond funds to put the new siren on the pole and the pole replacement in the amount of $10,787.
$10,787, and I'm not sure if there will be a cost incurred by Ameren to set a new pole, or if there'll be a hookup fee for electricity. I did not get to make that phone call today.
Okay. Mr. Bateman.
I think we need to put that on the agenda. You know, when Mrs. Schmidt was on the council, we had some siren issues on a storm, and I think it's something that we just shouldn't look the other way and make sure we get these things operating properly and in a matter where we don't have to worry about it and our citizens feel safe. So I think it's a good use of funds. I'd like to know the discount, you know, if he's got a dollar amount, but I just think it's something that this is one of those that we need to spend the money, and we're going into that time of year anyway. It's Illinois. It's that time of year, no matter what time of year it is. So,
The discount is 3% if we pay for everything up front, so it would be a total of $410.
Okay. So, Mr. Heineke.
Well, yeah, if I remember correctly, when we moved the siren off the top of City Hall years ago over to the county property, not to put Ameren on the spot, but I was thinking either the labor was donated or the pole was donated by Ameren at that time. But that could have just been a program they had back then. I don't know. But it's worth asking.
they've always, even with Pigs and Swigs, they've always been very community supportive. I mean, if there's a cost, there's a cost. But I don't think they would go out of their way to charge us an exorbitant amount, if any. They've always supported the community. The Union Street project has showed that. They didn't even bat an eye. They moving the gas line as we speak that needs to be moved. I think they're a good community steward, and all we have to do is ask, and I'm sure they'll take care of us.
So then the agenda item would be to pay $10,787 for the siren replacement plus costs of the pole, if any. Mr. Downs.
I agree. I think the pole on North Kiku's, or the siren on North Kiku is really important. I think we should do it. But how long has that been non-operational? Do we have an idea?
Long time. Chief, do you have that list of the locations of the sirens that you could distribute to the council again?
Yes.
Okay. I know you've shared that with us before, and I've got a copy at home. I think it's useful information.
I'll get it out by morning.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Bateman.
Does there need to be a third vote on if we're paying it all 100% up front to take a discount, or?
I think we're just going to pay it 100% up front. I don't know why we would hesitate
what
not to, unless the other aldermen would.
No, you could just word it not to exceed, so if it comes in cheaper, it's.
Yep. Okay, so we'll place that on the regular agenda as well. Okay, that's it. Does anybody else have any other announcements they would like to share? Mr. Downs.
Hey, I just wanted to address an issue that I just recently saw. There was an issue where there was some flyers of a hate group that was recently distributed through the streets of Lincoln, and I just wanted to let anyone who's listening know that the police are aware, and that the city of Lincoln absolutely 100% denounces racism and hate in all forms. Lincoln is no place for that sort of thing, and if anyone has any information on it, please report it to the police. That's it.
I would like to ask citizens to check your security cameras. Those are widely used nowadays. If you got any footage whatsoever, I'm sure Paul would love to sit through hours of it to make sure it's correct, or even if the flyer wasn't in your yard, You may have caught somebody going down the street about the same time. So get involved and let's stop this stuff. And, you know, no information is useless. It's all information. So.
Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a U.S. Census self-response rate. I know all of you look forward to these numbers every week, almost as much as you look forward to City Administrator Calvin's Comcast channel updates. But I got to tell you, this is probably one of the last times I'll give the numbers because the self-response process is now transitioning into the enumerators going into communities because people have either responded or they're not going to or have forgotten. So the enumerators are out, but I will give a few when they do come in. But right now we're at 62% nationally, which is actually on par with what it was 10 years ago. I think the preconceived notion was that COVID would dramatically be detrimental to response rate, but it actually has not been too much. Maybe it's because people are sitting at home. What else are they going to do but fill out their census report? Illinois still is ahead of the national rate at 66%. Logan County is ahead of Illinois at 68%. Lincoln is right there at the state response rate of 66%. Mount Pulaski still knocks it out at 75%. So if you see enumerators walking around the neighborhoods, that's what's going to be happening soon.
The only announcement I have left is I was asked by the committee for balloons over Route 66 to remind everybody that that event will be taking place on August 28th and 29th on that weekend. They will be launching from and doing a glow on the 8th Street property as last year, except for it will not be a large gathering of balloons there. They're going to actually spread them out throughout the community. So you're likely to see some there, and at other locations they'll announce those whenever those happen. So glad to see that event's coming back again this year. Mr. Parrott.
I think there's around 29, is it 29 pilots that's committed to coming?
Somewhere around there. That was the last number I heard. Okay. Anything else?
Motion. Second.
Alderman Bateman made the motion. Alderman Keller second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 8:37 p.m.